If you asked a group of college football fans, the average college football fans, how many Georgia Bulldogs they could name on the roster right now, I'm not sure many would be able to think of five, right? Just five Georgia Bulldogs on a team that might win the national championship this year. I don't think there are many college football fans who could do it. I think people know Carson Beck now. 12 months ago, the average college football fan probably didn't know who Carson Beck was. They thought Georgia would fall off a cliff once Stetson Bennett left. No, they had a guy like Carson Beck who's really good. And people know who Carson Beck is now. But I don't think the average college football fan could name five current Georgia Bulldog players, which is crazy because this team is very, very good. But I think what we will remember this team years down the road is that it was made up of a lot of really, really good football players. A lot of really good football players. But there aren't the big names on this team, right? There aren't the big names on this roster that you could have thought of previous Georgia teams, right? Or Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, right? These national championship teams, even Clemson a few years ago, they had big names up and down the roster. This Georgia team doesn't. Now, if you're watching this video, you know how good this Georgia team is because you're up to date on everything Georgia football and recruiting related. If you're watching this video, if you're watching this channel, you are in the 99th percentile of Georgia fans as far as the most knowledgeable Georgia fans out there. So y'all know what I'm talking about. But does the average college football fan know who Dylan Bell is? Maybe, probably not. What about Trevor Etienne? Maybe, probably not. Dom Lovett. I don't think people outside of Missouri and Athens, Georgia know how good Dom Lovett is. Do any of them know who Tate Ratledge is, who's been starting 4 years in a row now? I don't think any college football fans or the average college football fan could name you Georgia's left tackle, who could be a possible first-round pick this time next year and earn a screen, right? Which leads me to my next question. Who is Georgia's best player? Who is the best player on this Georgia roster? Now, three guys come to mind to me, and these are the three guys that I think the average college football fan probably knows, right? And it's still a maybe. Carson Beck, Mykel Williams, Malachi Starks, right? As I scratch my nose. Those are the three players that come to my mind when I'm thinking about who are the best players on this team. Now, people might remember Mykel Williams as being a five-star and Malachi Starks too, right? They're entering their third season. I think the average college football fan has probably heard of those guys. Maybe not. But outside of that, I mean, no one knows who C.J. Allen is right now outside of Athens, Georgia. They may have seen glimpses of him making plays towards the end of last year, but they don't know where he's from. They don't know what class he's in. They don't know anything about him, right? Probably the same for Smile Munden. Probably the same for Dalen Everett. Janelle Aguero, guys on the defensive line, Nazir Stackhouse. Missouri fans know who he is because he intercepted that pass last year, but there aren't many people across college football world who probably think that they are big college football fans. They probably couldn't name you one defensive lineman, maybe Mykel Williams, but they probably couldn't name you another linebacker, right? These outside linebackers, entering year two, along with Chaz Chambliss. People don't know who they are. You talk about a no-name team. Remember a few years ago, we talked about Georgia having a no-name defense. I think it was either the 18 or 19 defense. Maybe it was the 20 defense. I'm not really sure, but several years ago, it was a really good group of defenders. It was a very good defense, but it wasn't, full of star-studded names. And I think this team is kind of the same. And if you're a Georgia fan watching this video, you can name running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, offensive linemen. You can name the whole roster again because we've talked about, I feel like, every player so far this year. We're only, mid-April, right? So y'all know who these players are, but the more I dig into it, the more I think like the average Michigan fan, the average Oklahoma fan, the average Oregon fan, they might not be able to name five players on this roster. And again, that's crazy to me because I think this team could win a national championship. Right? I think Texas may have some bigger names on the roster. Maybe Ohio State does. Maybe this is just a down year for college football as far as big names go. Storylines will emerge, but in April, the big storylines are what's going on outside of college football. NIL, the transfer portal, conference realignment. Those three are taking over the college football news right now. It's not one particular player. Again, usually this time of the season, there's two, maybe three guys where everyone's talking about Heisman. This year, I mean, Carson Beck's name has been thrown around. Quinn Ewers' name has been thrown around, but there aren't many giant names right now in college football. There's not this transformative player. There's no Caitlin Clark in college football right now. Caitlin Clark, it turned women's college basketball around. Nobody cared about women's college basketball, like ever, until this year. Now, I might be wrong. That might be a stretch, even though I think I'm right. I tuned into college basketball, women's college basketball this year because of her. Georgia doesn't have a guy like that. And sometimes that's good because normally the quarterback at Georgia is quiet, reserved, lets us play, lets us talking, play out on the field, right? Than rather Baker Mayfield chirping it up left and right. We saw that with Stetson Bennett and Carson Beck and, a few other guys in the past. Jake Fromm wasn't overly, outspoken or anything like that. But normally the quarterback and most of the leaders, they're not out there getting in trouble. They're not making headlines, right? They're keeping it, to themselves or in their bubble. At least, it comes from, they've had their driving instances, right? I mean, that's, they got to get that under control. And it seems like they did. I know Trevor Etienne got in some trouble with the driving without a license or stuff in the car, whatever it was. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of bad press going around right now from this team. But at the end of the day, outside of those three, Carson Beck, Michael Williams, Malachi Starks, who would you say, now I'm talking to the viewer right now, who would you say is Georgia's best player? If you asked a random Nebraska fan, Penn State fan, who's the best player that the Georgia Bulldogs have on their roster? They would probably have to think really hard. They'd probably say that Georgia's a really good team, but how many players or how many fans, right, the average to above average college football fans, how many Georgia Bulldogs do you think they could name right now on April 20th? Probably not a lot. And in a way, that's kind of good because Georgia has all these, again, youngry. That's the word I came up with last week. Young and hungry players. They're youngry. And there's going to be a lot of players, I think, on this roster right now, C.J. Allen being one of them, who people know about this time next year, really know about as far as guys who are still, coming back for the 25 season. I think as the season goes on, everyone's going to know about Dylan Bell and Kobe Young and Dom Lovett and Trevor Etienne, if they don't already, Roderick Robinson, right, those guys. Maybe Kristen Miller on the defensive line steps up. Maybe Raylan Wilson at middle linebacker emerges and he becomes a national name. Again, maybe it's one of the freshmen who turn it on this year and everyone's talking about him, right? So, I look up and down the roster and I see talent everywhere. Every position group, it's talent from top to bottom. But it's full of guys that the average college football fan doesn't know, and it's going to get them in trouble when they think Georgia's going off a cliff or Georgia's not going to be able to compete for a national championship because the talent isn't there, right? No, the talent's there. You just don't know about it. And it's my job to tell everyone, Ole Miss fans, Texas fans, Alabama fans, Kentucky fans, Tennessee fans that maybe have forgot, Auburn fans who have maybe forgot, Georgia's not going anywhere. They're more talented than you think. They're one of the preseason favorites to win the national championship again. It's because they've got a lot of really good players that people just don't know about. And, it's unfortunate for the player, but again, they got a lot of quiet assassins on this roster that they don't need the fanfare. They don't need the haters to wake them up. They don't need the doubters to give them motivation. Like, they laugh at that stuff. It doesn't bother them. They want to play football. And when their mindset is on the team and on them getting better each and every day and learning and developing their craft, you don't have time for the haters. You don't have time for the doubters. You don't have time to see what other people are saying because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The lion doesn't care about the sheep's opinion or something like that. It's supposed to rhyme, I think, but I think you know where I'm going, right? These players are focused on themselves. And again, most of college football may not know who they are, but they don't care because one day they will, probably sooner than later. You can read more about these players and everything else Georgia football related over on Dawg Post. You can sign up to our free newsletter. That link is down below. It's free to sign up, and it's free to read a lot of stories, so make sure you check it out. Thanks for watching this video. Always appreciate it. Hope to see you on the website.